Okay, one rivalry game down for UNC, another to go next week, but this one did not go their way, losing to Duke 32-25. The second half here was really good for UNC. It felt like they had taken all the momentum. Duke literally took the rug right from under their feet and won it at the end. But boy, this was probably one of the best offensive outputs we've seen from Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably the best Carolina has played all season, if you want to step back from it a little bit. Certainly the best environment they've had at home, dating all the way back to the opener. But it comes in a loss.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of parse that for a second. But before we get into Carolina, I want to give Duke some credit here, because this was a team that was reeling a little bit. They lost to UConn after the big win over Clemson. Then Virginia comes into their building, dominates them, ends their ACC title game hopes. And you're kind of wondering what team you're going to get. And Carolina came to play in this game, pushed Duke to the limit, had the lead in the fourth quarter, but Duke ultimately, sounds like a football cliche because it is, was a few plays better.
Yeah.
And Carolina, you know, all season long hasn't really had the character of a Bill Belichick team. They made a lot of mistakes. They beat themselves, had a lot of penalties, and ultimately that was the difference in a one-score game.
You're talking about Duke. I mean, they've been reeling with injuries a lot over the last few weeks. I mean, for the last few weeks, they've been starting freshmen in their as safeties, and so those guys aren't as they're not as ready for the moment at this point. And also their veteran linebacker Trey Freeman didn't play this game; he's out injured, and you could see how down as the stretch of this game, as Duke continued to play, the tackling got a little bit poor, the coverage got a little bit poorer, and you saw there were opportunities for Carolina to really march down the field and take advantage of that. But then it ended up being the veteran leadership on offense to take Duke. And then also you'd have to give a nod to the coaching staff. One of the things that Manny Diaz told us after the game, he was like, hey, last week we had a field goal blocked. We knew that was going to be on tape and that Carolina was going to see it and probably overload one side. So he knew that he was going to either get a roughing the kicker, which he got today, or they were going to be able to run their fake to Todd Polino, which they ended up doing today, and that ended up ultimately winning the game. So it both worked out for them because they got the perfect look for both of those, just because of something that he knew that they did wrong on tape that the Carolina would try to exploit. So, seniors for Duke on offense, but then also the coaching staff really stepping up to try to get them this win today.
Yeah, Manny Diaz winning the triangle. Beats NC State, you could say, in that game. Outcoached Dave Doran in that one, in this one, to all the points you just made. Outcoached the legend himself, Bill Belichick, and it came down to the little things, right?
Yeah.
I know you want to talk a little about that play that harkens back to Bill Belichick in 2015, and it all happens because of a penalty. This is the first half. Both teams have traded scores to start. Duke misses a field goal, but then there's a roughing the kicker penalty. And it sets up Manny Diaz to have this perfect play at the perfect time. And Darian Mensah nails it, hitting Jeremiah Hasley.
Exactly. One of the things he talked about in that time, he says he knows this as a former defensive coordinator himself. He's like, after something like that, your defense is a little frazzled. They were off the field. Now they have to come back on the field. He said it was the perfect time to run this play. So essentially what the play was an old Bill Belichick trick play that he actually used from the Patriots in a game versus the Baltimore Ravens in early 2015, but it was the 2014 season. This was in the playoffs in the AFC divisional round. And essentially what happens is the right tackle lined up as an ineligible receiver almost in the slot spot. And then you have the tight end that will line up pretty much in the right tackle spot. So as far as the defense, they're looking at a normal alignment. They're not going to take off with Jeremiah Hasley and try to cover him down the field, and he was wide open. This worked so well for Bill Belichick in that comeback game versus the Ravens. The NFL actually outlawed that particular play in that offseason in 2015. So that hasn't been outlawed here in college. Manny Diaz was asked about it after the game. They were like, hey, did you do this because it's Belichick? And he brushed it off. He's like, this is an old college play. You got to know that he had to do it against Bill Belichick. But it just worked out perfectly for Duke. And that was essentially what we were talking about earlier. It's the situations. Todd Polino even said it himself. When he ran that ball, it's the first time in his college career, and he's a senior, he's ever held the ball in his hands.
Wow.
And
what a moment.
And he was the fourth leading rusher in this game tonight for Duke. And so what a moment to step up. And it was one of those plays that they installed a few weeks ago that they said, and they knew that this game, it would have been perfect. And they said all week, this game is going to come down to the fourth quarter. And Polino said, hey, I've never had the ball in my hand before, but I was told all week we're going to run this play at some point. So I was ready. I was mentally ready to do this. And the situational game for Duke ended up winning out for them today.
And we haven't really seen like the trademark situational type football from Carolina all season, just because their execution has been so poor.
Yeah.
And in this game, you have to wonder, was Bill Belichick really ready for a college rivalry game? Because the penalties would suggest they were not. 103 penalty yards, I believe the number was 12 penalties compared to 3 for Duke, and it had a huge impact. It set up that play you're talking about on the fake field goal. It kept drives alive for Duke. It set UNC back as significantly as the final drive of the game.
Yeah.
They have a holding penalty, and they're deep in their own end looking at, first and 18. So these are the kind of things you can't do if you're going to expect to win a one-score game.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Even before that, when Duke scores that touchdown and they're over there in that corner, there was some pushing and shoving on Carolina's end. That's a 15-yard penalty right there. And then that gave Duke the shorter field to kick, so they squib it, and North Carolina is already backed up right here deep in their own area, and then they have the holding to back them up even more. It was just it was almost like they completely fell apart the entire game, but really at the end because the flags kept flying.
And it was also an example of maybe one of the first times this season Carolina getting a chance to deal with success.
Yeah.
Because to their credit, they had the momentum in the fourth quarter. This building was believing. I'm on the sidelines filming the game. The sidelines were believing, and that's because Duke goes up. They had the onside kick, talking about lack of execution. UNC tries the onside kick to start the second half. Love the call. Don't love the execution. It doesn't go 10 yards, so Duke gets a good field position. They're able to drive down, take a 2-score lead. UNC answers right back with 2 straight scores. Gio Lopez, we haven't mentioned his name yet. He's by far the best game of his season.
For sure.
Now, the numbers don't necessarily reflect it. He only had about 204 yards passing, 1 touchdown. But just watching him play, actually throwing the ball down the field, standing in, taking hits in the face of a blitz, playing real quarterback for what felt like the first time this year. And so they go down. He throws the touchdown pass to Jordan Shipp. Then there's another one, Davion Goss, to open the fourth quarter. And Bill Belichick goes for 2, which I thought was an interesting call at the time. It's kind of like, why are you chasing points here? Well, it's always the right call when it works.
Yeah.
And they get the 2-point conversion, which then gives them the lead, 25-24. And you're like, all right, what are they going to do from here? And the offense just can't really generate anything down the stretch. And it's Darian Mensah, who's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league, kind of getting them down the field in position to have that big play for Polino to win it.
But also going for 2, it felt like, and this is one of the things we were talking about upstairs in the press box, if you go for the 2, you make it, you're down by 6. Knowing Carolina's offense, what's more likely? Are they going to come down and kick a field goal, or are they going to come down and score a touchdown? If it ends up being the field goal game, then you feel good enough in Reese Verhoff, and maybe he ends up tying after 2. And so that could have also played into the idea with that, but when they end up going ahead by 1, I thought that was also a part of the genius part of that move as well for Bill Belichick. You're right. It felt like this whole stadium was believing. It felt like Carolina was in for a huge win here at home over Duke. And it was just, you felt like this was going to be like maybe the statement win for Bill Belichick. It didn't end up being that. Maybe his guys weren't ready. Maybe he wasn't ready. But now you have another rivalry game. They don't have to leave the state of North Carolina for 3 straight weeks. You have, Wake Forest last week, which is a rivalry game of sorts. Not as
warm up.
It's a warm up, and it's almost like it steps up a little bit every week. It's Wake Forest, it's Duke, and then it's NC State. And I don't know if Bill Belichick, if he didn't have his guys ready for the challenge for today, is he going to have them ready for the challenge of all the emotions for next week?
Yeah.
There's still an outside chance, very, very outside chance, that because of APR, Carolina could still be bowl eligible. It just depends. There's some 5 and 7 teams that will make it every year, just depending on how many teams end up being bowl eligible and win 6 games. And they're one of those teams that could possibly make that. But you have to win next week. it's literally all or nothing next week, and then everything else will take care of itself. And so is he going to have his guys ready for that and the emotion? Because in the NFL, you have rivalries, but do they feel like this? Not really.
Yeah.
You know? So how is he going to have his guys ready for that? That's going to be the big question.
And we've seen Carolina teams struggle with this before. I remember Drake May's final season. They go in for the final week of the season and completely lay an egg, inexplicably don't even compete in Carter Finley Stadium.
Yeah.
And, talking to Bill Belichick this week at the podium, he called this the rivalry, compared it to Army-Navy, speaking about the rivalry with Duke. And our Brian Murphy at WRAL asked Bill Belichick, he's like, hey, have you learned a little bit about the NC State rivalry? You talked a lot about Duke being the rivalry this week. And Bill Belichick, overall cordial, I thought, in the press conference, was not here. He goes, well, yeah, Brian, I looked it up and pretty smart. I think I got it. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. So some snark back to Murph, who I think his question was, it wasn't trying to be condescending.
Yeah.
I think it was warranted because I don't know if it's a Carolina ethos. I was actually talking to somebody, an administrator. I'm like, is this something you guys try to hand out? Try not to make State seem like your rival, even in football?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't quite answer the question. But because Mac Brown kind of didn't seem to fully engage in the NC State rivalry, maybe because he didn't perform very well in it, but always seemed to kind of try to sell the Duke one. And Bill Belichick did that a little bit in his presser this week. But you better be ready for the NC State one, because that team, you talk about just being ready for the moment. I mean, yeah, they fell on their face at Miami, but this is a team that's beaten Virginia, beaten Georgia Tech, and then just gets the big win this weekend. So NC State is certainly a team under Dave Doran is ready for the moment. They've proven it in the past.
You brought up a good point there that I guess I've never thought about until now. Really, the only Carolina coach that I've covered that made a big deal of NC State was Roy Williams. So it might be that's a good question that you had. It might be a Carolina ethos thing, where it's it's NC State. That's not our real rivals. But NC State sure thinks that you are.
Yeah.
And you really need to win this game. And it ends up being a heated game every single year. I mean, literally, this is why it ends the season every year for NC State and Carolina, because it is the biggest. It doesn't end with the Battle of the Blues. It doesn't end with Duke and Carolina. It ends with Red and Carolina Blue. So it's going to be interesting to see if the guys are going to be up for it, especially since we talked about all the new guys before Carolina. Are they really up for it? Do they know how big it is? Do they know what they're up against on the other side for those guys who are just chomping at the bit to get another win against UNC?
Because this is a UNC team that's completely reinvented.
Yeah.
Jordan Shipp was on the podium after this one. He knows the rivalry because he's played in it, and he was quoted as saying there's going to be fights. And there were fights in this game too.
Yeah.
And he wasn't saying violence, just kind of, the kind of chippiness that you get,
For sure.
the kind of things you get on the field. I mean, we literally saw NC State plant a flag in here at Kenan Stadium last year, and J.J. Jones going absolutely wild. I mean, it's stuff that's fun in college football until somebody gets hurt. But the point I'm making is that Jordan Shipp wasn't trying to incite violence or anything. He was just kind of speaking, hey, it's college football, it's a rivalry. But it's a fair question to wonder about the rest of the roster. And I think, Chris, I guess the positive for Bill Belichick and his job security, Dave Doran has gone a long way to secure his, beating Florida State, beating Georgia Tech. And, of course, if he can beat Carolina to end the season, I think it's almost pretty certain that he would come back if he could beat Carolina to round this thing out. Bill Belichick, I know they want him to come back. The question probably was, how did he perform in these rivalry games? And this game, at least today, they were competitive.
Yeah.
The people were into it. The building was excited. It was part of the kind of vision that they had for when they brought him here. Of course, you want to win. So I think the key here, I don't think his job is on the line next week. Maybe if he had fallen completely flat today and fallen completely flat against NC State, at least he's earned himself that.
Well, I said to a few people before this game, the first to 21 wins. That wasn't the case. Carolina didn't score much more than that. They scored 25, but that's a lot for Carolina, honestly, because their high of the season, is 27, maybe 30? I can't remember, one of those early games.
Richmond.
Richmond, they had was about 30. something like that, or maybe 34, whatever that was. And then against an FBS school, it was Syracuse when they had 27. So them having 25 in this game was big, that they were able to go beyond that. And I'm just going to, throw Belichick a little bail right here. He keeps saying every week, we're improving, we're getting a little bit better. And it was hard to see that early on or in the middle of the season. You actually see that now.
Yeah.
This game that they had tonight is not a game that you would have seen 5 weeks ago from Gio Lopez, or, the defense even looked a lot better. I mean, Duke really, if you take away all the penalties, they probably are kicking a lot more field goals than the touchdowns they were able to have. So really, like, the actual play of the defense was worthy of a win. It's just that the penalties kept Duke on the field, and then they were able to punch it in and score some touchdowns. But this Carolina team is getting better. If you're able to retain a lot of these guys and add in some of the big players that you have coming in, as freshmen who are supposed to be, great players. If you were able to get some really good players from the transfer portal now, because now you're not starting from behind, you can probably start now, because after next week, there's so many names.
How this works?
So many names are going to go in the portal. I'm sure people have already been contacted right now behind the scenes. Nod, wink, wink. It'll be interesting to see if Carolina can build on this and be a little bit better. But you saw the flashes of what they potentially could be in today's game.
Lot to chew on, plenty more to talk about.
Yeah.
It's Thanksgiving week. Buckle up. Let's get some turkey. It's going to be a fun one here as things finish out with the Triangle, as Duke finishes out with Wake Forest, another rival, and NC State Duke here coming up next Saturday. For Chris Lee, Matt Welter.
Really quick, I want to add this. Duke beat NC State, beat Carolina. They say they want to win the state championship.
Yeah.
And they want to beat Wake Forest next week. So we have to see if that ends up happening.
Hey, no ACC title for Duke, but a state championship, just as good. I love it.